Hey everyone, hiya. All right, let's start. If that's on. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Tafsir. I'm a final year medical student at UCL and I am taking today's Medmentor weekly clinic. So today we'll be talking about stuff about medical school applications, UCAT, BMAT, personal statement, interviews, anything that you guys need help in regarding the application process. We at Medmentor are here and today I'll be answering your questions live on Instagram Live, Twitter Live. We're also on our website live as well as on YouTube. So please do join us every week on Saturday at 6 o'clock. This Q&A will start now and you'll finish in about an hour by about 7 o'clock. So put your questions in below, either comment them below or send in a question card. I'd really like to hear any questions you guys have and try and help you guys out with it, whether that's to do with how life is like as a medical student right now, or has been for myself in the last 6 years, to like tips to getting into med school and how to go about getting work experiences or working on your personal statement and stuff like that. We've done, I think, 7 or 8 previous Q&A live sessions like this before. So if you're like going away within this hour, don't worry about it. You can catch up on it as we put this up on our IGTV live. So do have a look at those and previous sessions that we've done, and hopefully they'll be beneficial to you. Okay, cool. The other thing that I'd like to say is about Medmentor ourselves. So we are we're a social enterprise that work to try and get kids into medical school, and we've got a website, we've got various social media platforms, and that we try our best to add information out there for free to help you guys get in. So do have a look at our website and our kind of daily to weekly social media posts, and hopefully they're of help. And we welcome your feedback, so let us know if there's anything else that you want to see from us, and we'll see if we have capacity to do that. Brilliant, cool. So, without further ado, let's have a look at who we've got on today. So, all right, cool. Hi, Roshan. Nice to see you again. We've got Maisha, Sultana, Mike. We've got Eugenia, Becky, PM Hogan, Madhu. So there's a few that have joined us in previous weeks. You guys know how it works. Do send in your questions, and I try my best to answer them. So yeah, keep them going. All right. So I think to recap last week, we talked a bit about A levels and how to basically increase our productivity when it comes to study routine and effectively revising for exams. So I think I'm not someone who normally talked about how I studied all the way back in A levels. However, I do realize now that whatever methods I did start using in year 12 and year 13, I did develop further as I went through medical school, and I kind of like built on them. So that was quite interesting for me to kind of reflect on as well after our last Q&A session. Do let us know if you have any comments regarding last week's questions, anything else that you guys want to follow up. Hi, another aspiring medic. Hi, M. Shah. Thanks for joining us. Do get your questions in. We've not got anything on Instagram at the moment in terms of questions, so I'm going to go straight to YouTube. Oh, hello. Grace, hi. I haven't joined on here before. Hi, Grace. Nice to see you on this time on YouTube, not on Instagram. You had some really cool questions last time, so do chuck them at me if you're happy to. Hi, another paramedic. Yeah, cool. So yeah, chuck them in. So we've got the first question already, which is great. Another aspiring medic always asks the best questions. So any book recommendations from you personally? Right, that's super interesting. So I'm someone who's now started to get into audiobooks, just because they are more convenient day to day and just a way to kind of consume more content easier. However, I do value books a lot, and I think when so the first and most recent audiobook that I kind of listened to was called The War Doctor. It was by David Knott. Have any of you guys heard of The War Doctor? If you have, comment down below what you think of it, or like if you have read it or not. I would 100% thoroughly recommend The War Doctor as a book, personally, just because of the fact that it really helped me to kind of reaffirm the reasoning behind why I wanted to do medicine in the first place. And I'm someone who's got a keen interest in global health. So looking at humanitarian work and the selflessness that David Knott has or had was pretty amazing to see, and it's a debate that I think I like having in my own head a lot of the time. There were loads of different amazing aspects to that book, not least the fact that it was a thrilling book, super interesting, and allowed me to reflect on a lot of things that was not just scientific medicine, but all the other aspects and ethical situations that come with it, and the perspective that you can get in such a difficult war-torn environment like in Syria or in Bosnia. Yes, so yeah, that was a great question, and another aspiring medic. Yeah, you read it, which is brilliant, Roshan. Yes, would definitely recommend. And it was a really good book. The next on my medical book. So basically, after I got into med school, I think obviously I stopped like reading medical like books like that, just because I thought it was more for personal statement. But I did obviously. I think I've mentioned here before, and I think a lot of you guys have. You guys have read When Breath Becomes Air. That was a really moving book, and it was quite a small book as well. It was really good. It was just emotional, and helps put you in that perspective of a patient to an extent, and all that developing empathy and stuff like that. Well, it's good to kind of see it from the other side, and it was really sad, but also very kind of enthralling in that sense, in finding out what the journey is for someone like that, for such an amazing person. And the books I read on my that I put on my personal statement were quite interesting. Trust Me, I'm a Junior Doctor by Dr. Max Pemberton. That was a really funny book. If anyone wants a funny book, I'd read that. I was laughing the whole way through that book. Gave you the real life aspect of what it was like to be as an F1 in like the 1990s. And I read that book by Dr. Max Pemberton because I went to the Royal Society of Medicine's Christmas lecture, where he gave us a talk about his journey into med school and all the funny stories behind it, and the fact that he actually he was definitely not on track to be achieving amazing grades or doing great things, and came from a difficult family background as well, and still made it to an amazing doctor, as well as someone who's now in the media quite regularly. And so that was quite aspirational for me. And I read the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. That had just so many different components to it, loads of different things that you can look at in that book. And that just opened my eyes to oh man, medicine is more than just a bit of science. There's a whole lot to it. And it's very intricate in terms of the dilemmas that come with that, and the controversies in medicine within the last however many years we've been around, to be honest. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and the other one was Trust Me, I'm a Junior Doctor or something. By Dr. Max Pemberton. Cool. What else do we have? So 100% I agree. Another aspiring medic said she agrees. I felt like I could reflect on what experiences I haven't had yet, and you definitely will. So it's a very good read at the beginning of your career, which it is for kind of all of us right now. All right, so we've got some questions from Grace on the YouTube live area. So the first question from her is, how many pieces of work experience? Let's have a look. How many pieces of work experience did you do? The next question, how many universities did you apply to, and how many books did you read? So Grace, I'll address your book-related question because we're on that theme just at the moment, and then we'll move on to the rest. So the book that I read was how many books I read? I read 2 books. I tried to read a third book, but I just couldn't get through that book. It was really scientific, and I just couldn't I think it was called The Emperor of All Maladies. I think a lot of people have read it, but it just wasn't clicking in my head. So I read 2 books, and the reason why I read them was because The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks were talking about cancer cells, and I went to a summer school to do with cancer. So that was like that's how I got around to reading a book like that. And then the Trust Me, I'm a Junior Doctor book came from someone that I saw at a lecture. So that's how I got around it. I wouldn't recommend like having loads of books first name, or like having a book or 2 would be nice, as long as you've read it and you've taken something from it and it fits in within the personal statement. And there's so many books out there now for you guys as medical school student applicants. Brilliant. Okay, so the next question I have is from Harim, and then I'll address yours, Grace. So Harim goes, "Hi, I had my UCL interview recently and just don't know how it went. When you had yours, did you know how it went, or if it went well, or were you also unsure?" I'll be honest with you, after every exam and interview I've ever had, I've never really known how it's gone. And I thought that the UCL interview was nice, but I didn't think I did enough to get in just because it was so nice and so calm. I thought that I didn't add enough to my answers or something. And I remember very well the night after the interview just thinking, oh my God, I should have said this. But a couple of weeks later, I got the offer. So it seemed to have gone pretty okay. So what I'd say, don't worry about what's already happened. Just move on, and you got other things, I'm sure, whether that's other interviews or A-levels to revise for, maybe, or maybe you don't. I don't know. You guys are in some COVID world. But yeah, just move on from it. There's no point dwelling on the past. There's only a few things that you can learn from after you know an outcome. But yeah. Cool. So the next question I have is from Roshan. So Roshan goes, you mentioned being in 6th year. So did you sit the SJT this year? If so, how did you find it? Roshan, I don't know if you're on Twitter, but on Twitter, there's been a lot of fuss about the UK FPO and what they've done when it comes to sitting the situational judgment test. The situational judgment test, or SJT, for everyone on this, is like was 50%, like half of my MBBS, or like my medical degree of 6 years, and it is, I think, the same for everyone. Really interesting. But the SJT is one of the funniest exams I think I've ever sat in my life. I think everyone always said you can't revise for this exam, you can't really prep for this exam, and based on that, I didn't go to these like conferences or pay for anything. I just did some past papers, and I revised with a group, so it was quite enjoyable, and it was like lead up to Christmas, so obviously we're a little bit relaxed anyway. But obviously, it's a really important and big exam. I found it similar to the past papers in terms of how difficult it was. So when you guys get around to it, SJT will still be a big component, if not bigger, when it comes to your final years of med school. And what you realize is it's a lot of like, it's an annoying exam. You just don't know. It's just a lot of the time it's pure luck. It's very subjective, very similar. Okay, so think about your UCAT SJT little bit that you guys do, times that by 10 in terms of difficulty, and like trying to add principles to it when so many of the options are very similar and very waffly and subjective, and things that you wouldn't do. It's all about what you should do according to GMC guidance rather than what you would do in real life. So sometimes going in and being in the mindset of a doctor or like an end of year, final year medical student practically is probably worse than being like in the mindset of someone who's got the GMC guidelines in their head. So a long way around it, SJT is a jokes exam. Good luck to everyone who ever does it again. I have no idea how I've done on it. I'll find out in a couple of months and keep you guys updated. But yeah, cool. That's the SJT. So my experience on actually sitting the exam was so it wasn't, I think a lot of things have come out recently from people's perspectives of sitting the exam. I sat the exam at home, like a lot of the people who complained about the difficulty that they had sitting the exam. I think there were headlines like coming out in like national newspapers now about how people had to urinate in their on their desk whilst during the exam because they weren't allowed to go to the toilet. Someone's exam got cancelled because they picked up the phone or something, and they didn't even pick up. It was like a landline, and all these different types of things. And I think this is the issue with having online exams at home when they haven't been trialed and tested before, and you don't know where things are going to go wrong. I was lucky that none of that happened for me. I did do it at home, and that easily could have happened to me, but I was lucky. So yeah, my experience was okay, but I have friends who have had torrid experiences doing the SJT at home, and let's hope they get better at this because it's a really, really important exam. One good thing out of all of this is that the people that did kind of get messed up by the SJT exam in the situation, they are allowed to resit the exam now, which is good, but obviously not the best, seeing as they were ready to do the exam when they were sitting it, and they basically got disqualified for the wrong reasons. So it's a shame, and it is what it is. Welcome to the issues that medical students face day to day. I think safe to say us final year medics this year have had it very bad when it comes to UK FBO stuff. Loads of things been going on. If you guys want to find out more about things going on for final years or like medical students, make sure you tune into Med Twitter with that hashtag. I think a lot of people are active on it nowadays, which is quite interesting and nice for people who don't have access to the medical field to have a look at, seeing as I had no idea about these type of stuff back like 6-7 years ago. Cool. We got a few comments below. So yeah, Pearson View debacle. Understand if you aren't comfortable with it. No, that's all right. Seems well to put such heavy weighting on just one exam. Yes, I think the SJT is made quite literally as a randomizer to make sure that all the top like medical students in the country don't end up in like one place or like one area or hospital or like city, because that's how how competition goes with us. And I think this year they started to try and randomize it even more. So they opened up a new section where it is just like it's a new question type that they asked us questions on without having a mark scheme in the specimen papers. So we actually don't know how to answer a question right or wrong in that first section out of the 3 sections. So that tells you all about it. But yeah, so just I don't think it's all it's maybe good for some of you guys to hear that there's a few things going on all the time in med school. But yeah, it's difficult in A-level, but it's also difficult in med school as well with all this stuff. Yeah, the house phone's ringing in the background of something sounded horrendous. I'm glad there's been some resolution. Must be so stressful. Yes. Thank you very much, Roshan, and another aspiring medic. Yes, I hope so too. And if not, oh well. But yeah, all good. Cool. I think if any of you guys have any other questions about like the final year stuff or like going into F1 or like how like what the aim of med school even is, like feel free to ask, because obviously I'm in a good position to start answering those type of questions. And I think the academic foundation program had offers come out for them in the last 1 to 2 weeks as well, so we can always talk about that. I didn't apply for it myself, but I know loads of friends that did and was looking into it as well before I didn't go ahead with it. But yeah, feel free to ask them. But yeah, thanks for the question, Roshan. That was nice to get off my chest, I guess. Cool. Grace, so coming back to your questions, you have asked a few others. So how many pieces of work experience did you do? I can answer that quite interestingly there, I think. So because I didn't know anyone in medical school, myself or any doctors, I didn't know how much was enough in terms of work experience. So I just did as much as I could get my hands around to. I even did work experiences that probably didn't apply, like stuff like did a work experience with a telecoms engineer and stuff like that. I didn't end up talking about in my personal statement. So like in my personal statement itself, I think I put in about 6 or 7 different work experiences that I did, or volunteering, like work experience / volunteering. And I think looking back on it, looking at other mentees' personal statements and my friends, I think most of the time people had like 2, maybe 3 work experiences. Some people had 1, and that was fine, because it's all about what you make of those work experiences and volunteering opportunities. And a sneak trick when it comes to personal statement and interviews is instead of having to, like, for example, I had a mentee who only had one work experience that they'd done in a hospital, and because they just found it so hard to access work experience, and they did a volunteering role, but that was a little bit different, not medicine related. So they had one work experience, but we were able to rinse it because with that one work experience in a hospital, they shadowed in like 3 different wards over the week. So yes, maybe first time they said, oh, on my work experience at a hospital, I saw this. But then the next times they mentioned it, they were like, oh, so in the psychiatric ward that I was present in, or like observed in a cardiology ward, this, like, they didn't directly mention that this was a separate work experience or the same experience. They just mentioned experiences, even though it's from the same work experience 1 week that they had in the hospital. So I think that was very clever of them and us to do and think of, but I think that's the best way around it if you don't have enough work experiences. And hopefully that finesse will help a few of you guys, because it's not you're not being you're not lying here, you're not like covering the truth or anything. You're talking about, it's just your perspective of the work experience. So what I'd say is you reflecting on your work experience is so much more important than having a quantity, like the number of work experiences. But obviously a clinical environment is key. Cool. Hopefully that has helped a little bit there. And thank you, Grace, for the good luck. How many universities did I apply to? I applied to 5. I don't mind talking about my university application stuff. So if you guys are interested, drop a comment, question, or message. I applied to 4 medicine and 1 biochem at Leicester, I think, because I heard that if you did well in your first year in biochem in Leicester, you were considered, like if you came in the top 10 or 20%, you would be considered for the medicine course in Leicester. This was around like 6-7 years ago. I'm not sure if it's still around now, but some universities still deploy these type of strategies, so it's worth looking into these type of biochem courses. But yeah, I applied to that one and I got that offer, but obviously I didn't go because I had my med school offer, which was nice. But yeah, so I applied to 4 medicine, 1 biochem for universities. I think, how many books did I read? I think I already answered. Yep, so that's fine. Cool. Oh, they still do that. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, one thing I didn't realize, another aspiring medic, about these type of apply. So obviously, I think everyone applying for med school is always in a very high percentage of the population when it comes to their school and how well they do in tests and amongst like peers. So I think obviously I was in that variety, and I thought that, oh, coming like top 10 or 20% in a biochem like degree cohort seems pretty calm, because I'm like in the top 10% maybe in my school. However, getting into higher education university, I really thought like, wow, like being top 10 or 20% in any university degree course, let alone something like biochem, where it's really like is very science heavy, and it's very difficult to get into that percentage because it's competitive. Everyone's looking to do that so that they can get into medicine or like do really well and get a first. Actually getting that top 10 to 20% is very tricky, and I am glad I didn't have to try and take that route. And for those that did take that route, you guys did really well. That's amazing. So, but yeah, it's not impossible, but it is a little bit difficult. So if you ever have that type of option, think about it before you go ahead and make sure that's a degree that you can do well in. Cool. Okay. Then next question I have is from another aspiring medic, and then I'll address yours, Grace, again. And we'll be back. Grace, thanks for your questions. Keep them coming. Thank you, another aspiring medic too. And Harim, I'll be addressing your question in just a second. Cool. So what is your biggest regret looking back at your years at med school? Oh man, that's insane. I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm quite a positive person. So I don't tend to have regrets. However, and I do think that a lot of the things that happen do like potentially have for good reason, and the fact that I think I have made the most of my time in the last 6 years. bar the last year, because of the fact that COVID is here, I think everyone's life has been a bit tricky right now. So obviously one regret would have been the fact that coronavirus has happened, but that's out of my control. But maybe, and I was active during that time and like did volunteer for things. But I maybe thought, I think I was, I think I should have done maybe more volunteering in like the hospitals if as required in the last year, as my biggest regret for looking back at med school. But even saying that, that's like that I couldn't help that, because I think a lot of people have COVID anxiety, and I definitely did until I had it. I had COVID like a month ago. But like this is like, that's just like a process, and I thought I'd just mention that because I think everyone is thinking about that right now. And for people going into medicine right now, it is okay to be worried about stuff like COVID because it will affect you personally. So that's just to put it out there. I think in the first 2 years of med school, I didn't take med school seriously at all. Like, I think you get to that point where, like, because I knew no one in med school, or like, I didn't realize how difficult med school was going to be. And I never realized the step up. So I think my biggest regret is probably feeling so intimidated and feeling like an imposter as soon as I got into med school. They're looking around me like, oh my God, everyone's so clever. I can't ever be like them, or I can't do well in medicine or stuff. Like, I think I was undermining myself in like first year and second year quite a lot, and thought that I wasn't very good at the science behind medicine compared to my peers. So I regret not kind of having the confidence early on in knowing that I'm gonna make hopefully a great doctor, and I deserve to be here in med school. And I think a lot of people from widening participation backgrounds feel that way, and a lot of people in general feel that way, like feel like a sort of imposter syndrome, because instead of being in the top 10% of your school, you're in terms of like intelligence or like ability or in like science or whatever, you're now like amongst everyone else. And so, yeah, so that's what I'd say. And then that led to me not taking medicine seriously enough, as in I was more cramming for exams in first year, and not studying enough at a good pace, to which that really affected, I think, my mental health towards the end of my first year when it came to exam time. So I really regret that, because that really hurt me, I think. And I learned from it for the next few years of med school. And had it not happened that early on, and if I didn't get lucky to pass, I don't know where I'd be right now. But those are a few things that I'd regret. And in first year, I think for you guys who are about to go into university, like, higher education is amazing for the opportunities it gives you. So take those opportunities when you can, whether that's going to a talk by someone that you're like interested, like a public figure, or like someone who's like a world leading like expert, or someone who's just an expert in the field or something that you're interested in. Like, go explore and like try different things, and socialize, or obviously by like having fun, but also kind of like in terms of academia, you can also socialize that way, as well as making the most of your opportunities. So I think that's what I did from second year onwards. But I think in first year that was a little bit of a regret for me. But I did socialize enough, but it was too much fun. Cool. That was thank you, another aspiring medic. Yeah, COVID anxiety is real, and I think that brings us onto our next question by Harim. Hi again. What would you say? Hi Harim. What would you say are the impacts of COVID in terms of mental health? Right. Okay. So so I've seen a whole lot of patients who have COVID right now, whether that be they're in the hospital wards, they're in ITU, or they're asymptomatic. I've seen people who have had COVID already as well in the past, and people who have yet to have it. And I think the issue stands like twofold. The fact that it seems like it's the anxiety and kind of depressive feeling about lockdown getting tangled with COVID as well. I think then it leads to so many different areas of life being affected. And I remember in March, when this whole thing kind of started, I like couldn't I was just thinking, I think I was debilitated by the fact that I knew how much of an impact this one virus would have on like life, society, people's lives. It was crazy. Like, and I think I was debilitated by that knowledge because I'm someone who's like very keen on global health, and so therefore that's how I think, and that's the stuff I'm always researching into. And COVID is global health, like on the maddest scale in our like current era. And like the first thing I thought about was, wow, okay, the individual impact on people's lives, one to one, who die or have from COVID or affected by it, long-term health consequences of long COVID, and then comes on second fold the family around the person who's got COVID and how they're affected, people's finances, people's work, lockdown affecting that, lockdown affecting people's mental health. Like all these things kind of compounded in my head when I was thinking about it, and they are doing so quite literally as we're speaking right now, in current affairs. So I think so that was just like the background of like what's the thought process behind this mental health, like the mental health problems that COVID brings about. And so obviously it's been bad for everyone's mental health. I remember in the first 2 months of lockdown, a friend of mine works for Mind, the charity. It's a really good mental health charity, and they said that they had an increase of like 80 to 160% of people that come to them for help in that like just last month period or something like that. So that tells you a lot about how people are feeling. There was already a loneliness epidemic before COVID, and I think that's already getting worse. And I think a lot of, in terms of medicine, we're starting to recognize loneliness as a component to a lot of mental health disorders, and maybe even a sort of end outcome of many disorders in itself, or a disorder within itself. So I think there's a lot to that. So yeah, there's a lot of impacts in terms of mental health, mostly negative. Whether it's there is a positive spin to all of this as well, like with the fact that not really a positive, but the fact that obviously a lot of people have started to self-reflect, I think, and who have been caught up in their like daily lives and day jobs and like doing loads of things. Things have kind of like come to a halt, and people are starting to reflect more. I think that's good to have, and something that's like society has not been conscious enough of, and that should be good for people's mental health. But obviously the negative aspects far outweigh that because of the anxiety and depression around it all. But yeah, I think if there's a question like that you ever get, I'd say look at a few papers. There's loads of statistics out right now, mental health and COVID, and it's quite bleak. But yeah, it is what it is. Cool. Okay. I'm just seeing a few comments about the last point that I made. Roshan saying whining participation is so important, and really appreciate you sharing your experiences. Relate to this so much with my undergrad, and have been dealing with imposter syndrome with my med interview. Highly relatable, Roshan. But yeah, you're good enough to get in. Feel that confidence and convince yourself, because you need to be convinced before anyone else can be convinced. But I'm sure you'll make a great doctor, and that's what you need to have in the back of your head. Cool. And I have to say that to myself, I think, every couple of days, even after getting into med school and being in my final year. So tells you everything about it. It doesn't go away sometimes. Another aspiring medic, I got that imposter syndrome as to a certain degree as well. And it's crazy to know that so many people around you will be feeling the same way to you. Yes. And I think speaking to all my friends now at the end of 6 years, imposter syndrome has been such a mad component to all our lives in university. And I think a lot of bloggers and like YouTubers now have started speaking about imposter syndrome, especially in the medicine field. However, we didn't have that 6 years ago, so it was almost like a taboo type topic. Like I couldn't even articulate it until like in third year I saw an article that came out. I was like, oh, so that's what I'm feeling, imposter syndrome. So it's nice to label it and then try and find mechanisms around it. Imposter syndrome, the bane of everyone's life. But yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts, another aspiring medic, and Roshan, appreciate that. Thank you guys for joining. You've joined our Medmentor weekly live session. If you have questions about medicine application process, life as a medic right now, anything of the sort, feel free to drop them below. We've had some really interesting conversations already, so keep them coming. Cool. All right. So the next question I have is from Grace on the YouTube live. So, did you have any bad med school interviews? So that's a great question, Grace, that I will have to answer with a yes. Yes, I have had a bad med school interview, although I didn't think at the time it was that bad. I thought I did okay. So I had a medical school interview at Cardiff. At the time, it was a panel interview, and it was really early on. It was like in early November. So I had only just started recovering from the DMAT and started interview prep, and I was not prepared enough, I think. And that was, I think they could tell that in the interview, and that's where I learned a lot from to kind of ace my UCL interview 3-4 months down the line, because I learned a lot from that experience. So that's why I always say practice interviews are really, really important. Obviously, there's no better practice interview than the real interviews. So I think I was lucky that the Cardiff interview came so early on that I could learn from it to make use of whatever I learned for the next interview. So if any of you guys think that some interviews have gone bad or have got rejections from interviews, don't worry about it. I was in the same boat as you guys, and then I got an interview later down the line and I did well because I had that extra motivation and learned a lot. I think the Cardiff interview was bad because I think it was 20 minutes and I got asked like 24 questions. It was a crazy interview. It was like quick fire. I remember walking in and just coming out with all my energy zapped from my body. I answered everything that I thought pretty okay or well-ish. And it tells you a lot about how you can be lucky on the day. Like, it doesn't really mean that, yes, you're 100% gonna make an amazing med student or not. Like, the Cardiff Med School interview back then, 9 out of 10 of the interviews would have been like, oh, what's on your personal statement? Oh, nice, a few nice like conversational things that they would have asked you about. But my one was that like rare 1 in 10 interview that they ask every like 1 out of 10 applicants, where they kind of like grill you really hard to just push you and see how like good you are or not. And I think with me, there were loads of random questions that weren't anything to do with my personal statement that I wasn't expecting. I answered them okay, but I think what happened with an interviewer was that they had a point and I had a point and we disagreed on a point, and I thought I handled it okay, but evidently not, because I quoted a fact that he disagreed with basically, and he was like, this is wrong, and therefore I would never get into confrontation with people, but let alone in an interview. So if there's anything to learn that. But yeah, that was my Cardiff Med School interview. That was a little bit bad apparently. But I only had 2 interviews for med schools, so Cardiff and then UCL. So I don't really have any other med school interviews. And then your next question that Grace sent in about 10 minutes ago was, did you ever get asked about sustainable healthcare? Sustainable healthcare? That's interesting. So no, I've never been asked about sustainable healthcare. But I can think of, like, in medical school, we do talk about sustainability when it comes to like medicine in general, and I think it's getting incorporated in many people's curriculums. But that's it. I've never been asked about it, so I can't really say anything more. But yeah, that's that, Chris. Cool. Yes, another experiment. Whoa, indeed. But it's all right. No hard feelings, Cardiff. Cool. Next question from another experiment. So, are you looking forward to working in a more integrated and digital NHS, or any concerns about it? Oh my God, another experiment. This is like, I wish the NHS had good systems, good digital systems. It is not a digital NHS right now. Don't even think that it is. I think there's probably like two, 3, maybe 4 kind of digital hospitals in the UK right now who have got like the right type of software that make life easier for your doctors and doing things and making things more efficient. And there's not many other hospitals in the country that can afford the systems as the American systems that were deployed. So the NHS is not digital enough. It needs to become much more digitalized in order to increase efficiency across primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care. I think primary care has done a lot for digital in terms of like having a digital NHS, with their computer systems, and like them being able to, as like almost small businesses, GP practices, deploying that type of digital healthcare, and they can make kind of independent decisions, whilst it's harder to do in hospitals because they're just big organizations, there's more red tape. So when you guys get into med school, and then get into becoming F1 and F2s, as you guys are the next generation of doctors, make sure you are pushing the digital NHS agenda to make things more efficient and better. It's just crazy how much time is wasted by not having a good system in place. And whether we'll ever get to it, I don't know. So that, in terms of concerns about it, I think everyone always talks about privacy, use of the information, handling of it. I think that's not the worry when it comes when doctors handle it. That is the worry if there's breaches to the system, if the government has access to things like. And I think the coronavirus app, I think the COVID tracker app debate was interesting at the beginning of the year, of last year, when people are like, oh, I don't want to be giving my GPS coordinates to like the government, or telling them what I do and don't and stuff like that. Like, it looks like a big brother system. That was an interesting debate. And I think in our society, we do value freedom a lot, and rightly so. But when it comes to NHS and digital systems, I think we over rely on the privacy argument, when like there's nothing really to say that your systems are going to be hacked or something like. And there's so much information that Apple and Google already have about you. Like, it's like, it's one of those things. So the only concern would be privacy, but I think that's something that, an argument that's overplayed, and I hope that the NHS starts getting in more AI systems, and more than anything, just on the base level, digitalizes their systems better for efficiency. And AI will not take over doctors' roles. Before anyone asks that question, it will only supplement doctors' roles to help them deal with more difficult cases, give more time to patient care, and will help them, just like computers and internet helps us to kind of get through the mundane tasks and the simple things. So hopefully freeing up a clinician's time. So if you guys ever get questions like that, make sure you answer it that way. I've been to like loads of med tech conferences in the past few years, and those are similar. Those are questions that come up a lot. Working within the NHS with the systems, well, good luck, guys. Yes, Dr. David Pension is one to look. Pension is, I don't know how to say that, is one to look up about sustainability in healthcare. Thank you, Roshan. I'll actually have a look at that myself. Quite interested in sustainability in healthcare at the moment. Cool. It limits, yes, another sparring med. It limits how much I can write, so that I meant was that the NHS is looking to be more integrated in digital. So what do you think about the possibility? But yes, you're answering anyway, so it's all good, fine. I agree. So you do agree. I did an EPQ on robot-assisted surgery, and there were so many more advantages than disadvantages. Yes, I agree. I think a lot of the time people are worried about change, and especially in healthcare, where obviously people's lives and health is on the line. So like things go up in terms of stake. But what it's an interesting debate to have, and I think most people. So I have a friend who's in the health tech sphere. And he's like a pioneer in that sphere at the moment, working with a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and has his own startup. And like his whole like group of people think that medicine is the next like tech like expansion that's going to come about in the next 50 years. Because if you look at everything in society right now, I think tech has gotten into every single component apart from healthcare. So in the next 50 years in our lifetime, we should see healthcare completely revolutionizing things. And it will be interesting to see how they do that. I think if things like improve, they will happen in America first, because they have the private like system, and they're more entrepreneurial there, and more willing to take risks, and like with their kind of like systems. And there's just such a large population. It'll be trialed there before anything comes to the UK. NHS a little bit more is probably a little bit more conservative when it comes to that, rightly or wrongly so. That's a really interesting EPQ though. Another sparring medics are good. Roshan, Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons Glasgow. I had an online event about the digital future of surgery. Was so interesting. Not sure if it's available on YouTube or not. Yes, there's so many conferences about these things. Go to them. I encourage you to do so. Even if you're not like a coder or something, like it's just good to be there and know about what changes could be happening. It's like learning about a new medication that might be coming around. Like we need to be ahead of the game because you're the next and we're the next generation of doctors coming through, and we need to be technologically literate. Yeah, and there's so many stuff online to do. I'd encourage you to have a look. That was a great question on medtech. So thank you for that, another aspiring medic. All right, I'm just now going onto YouTube to have a look at a few questions just been asked. So Grace asked, I've heard that there is a scientific question in interviews. Could you talk more about that, please? So Grace, there are no scientific questions in medical school interviews apart from in Oxbridge interviews. When it comes to those scientific questions, they'll be asking you questions that test your evaluation and analytical abilities, and that means they might draw on stuff from biology, chemistry, or maths, or A-level, AS, A2 stuff that you've done. They will probably challenge you from your base knowledge. So like if you know a certain level of knowledge, they won't ask you to recall a fact of that knowledge. They'll ask you a question that builds on that knowledge, but asks you, hold on, just yeah. So they'll ask you a question that builds on that knowledge and kind of like 2, 3, 4 times over in terms of the difficulty, and ask you to make assumptions and critically think before you get to an answer. So they're scientific-ish questions, and they're not like science A-level type questions. It's more analytical questions that Oxbridge ask you. And there's loads out there, I think, online right now about what type of questions Oxbridge can ask. There's some funny questions I remember coming up when my friends did Oxbridge interviews a couple of years back. It was like, oh, how many toothbrushes do you think there are in London? Or like, how many doors do you think there are in like a certain area of like England or something like that? Or like, how many bones are there in the human body? Like, these are things that you're not going to memorize. Like, you don't have that in your head. It's kind of, they're asking you to break that problem down and think about it in different ways, and then get to a reasonable assumption or guess. So yeah, Grace, hopefully I've answered that question to an extent for you there. Yes, data interpretation, yeah, agreed with another aspiring medic, is very common for MMI. That I don't think counts as scientific, although yeah, that could be scientifically interpreted. So yeah, data interpretation does come about like that, like looking at graphs and stuff, but again, doesn't recall on your scientific knowledge. And another aspiring medic, thank you for that. They mentioned that they've got Medic Mind has a data interpretation station and tutorial, so that's good to look at. Brilliant. Thank you, another aspiring medic. Appreciate that. I think I'll adjust my answer then to now, does each med school interview have scientific component? I'd say no, but they do have data interpretation. So yeah, that's good. Thank you for that. I'll take that on board. Hilary Bilal, hello. Can you please tell me when the medical universities will send interview results this year? I'm sorry, Hilary. I don't know. It depends on whichever university you've applied to for when they give their results. But when do interview processes generally finish? Well, last few years, they've generally finished in about April, like March, end of March or end of April. The reason being is by May, most people had A-level or like exams or something like that. So they allowed people to like think about their revision and things like that. But this year, obviously, you guys don't have A-levels, so I don't know if that might change. I do know that some medical schools like to don't mind actually interviewing later on within the summer after people have exam results. And if your results are good and you haven't got a place, you can ask them like if they want to give you an interview, they can, so they can even go on later on there. But generally, interview processes finish by end of May / end of, not end of May, sorry, end of April / end of March. Yeah. Cool. All right. Abby has put down Mindcology 101. I don't know what that is or who that is, but hiya. Cool. That's cool. All right. Thank you for your questions there, Hilary and Grace. Okay, cool. So we've got about 5 to 7 minutes. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to drop them below. This has been a super interesting session. Thanks for you guys' input. Another aspiring medic and Roshan and Grace. It's just like having a conversation, so it's nice to see you guys. Brilliant. Let's do that. Hey Roshan, congratulations on your interview. I think I might have, if you mentioned it before, I probably said congrats last week. So any last minute words of wisdom or advice for a medicine interview on Monday? Feel like I've run out of specific questions about it and just trying to keep calm now. Great. Okay, so good. Do try and keep calm. No need to cram or anything before the interview. You I'm sure are very sensible in terms of when it's come to your prep and knowing your personal statement, knowing about your work experiences and things that you've like read. You've probably like had like practice. You've probably done a few mind maps for interview questions. I think maybe just keep your brain ticking and just do a few in your head mind maps tomorrow of like a few questions here or there, just to keep your mind ticking in that like debating role or perspectives or like giving empathy. What in terms of last minute advice, I'd say just tomorrow maybe just have a look at all these like buzzwords that that people tell you to put in your personal statement or your interview answers. I think if you literally put in buzzwords for medical school interviews or something, like a whole, or like characteristics of a good medical student or doctor, loads of things come up. So just read them and just let them just sink into your like subconscious or something, so that you use them in your vocabulary. I'd say be upbeat, make sure you're confident in yourself. You have done enough preparation, I'm sure of it. And so therefore you don't have to worry, and walk in with confidence, knowing that you will get into this med school because you deserve it and you're good enough to. And make sure you're thinking of it as this is my opportunity to tell these like people in this med school that yeah, I'm amazing, this is why you should take me in. And approach it positively rather than, oh man, this is an interview, so scary, so stressful. Like try and change your mindset. We've talked about it before, I think. So yeah, try and change your mindset to that. If it hasn't been changed already, I'm sure it has. So you'll be fine. Nerves are normal. Last thing I'd say is like if you ever get a question about like current affairs or like things in the news, like medical school articles, those are good to have in your bank. So I remember before my med school interview, I had like 3 different types of medical articles that I had in my head in terms of what I could make points in debating about them or like addressing the key points of the article and stuff like that. So if you haven't done that already, tomorrow is fine to do it. It will just take an hour or two, or like anything in the news, just keep a little bit up to date. So I think the 3 different articles I had were one to do with like the NHS systems in general, one to do with like a specific scientific like discovery, like and like talking. So in that time, Ebola was around, so I remember learning an article quite well about that. And the other article was like about like diabetes or heart disease, and so like any type of stuff. Just have in the back of your mind there. Hopefully that's helped you a little bit. I think I've maybe waffled a bit, but those are 2 or 3 key points to take forward. Nothing more, I think, is left in your preparation. I'm sure, Roshan. Just good luck on Monday. All the best. I'm sure you'll smash it. When generally does fine. So last question from Grace that I've got is, if you fail exams in med school, could you get kicked out? The answer to that is yes, you can get kicked out if you fail exams in med school, Grace. But you do normally get to resit the exam before you get kicked out. So if you fail one exam, you can resit them in a couple more weeks to a month. Some med schools, you have to resit them the following year. And take that extra year out to revise or like to relearn the content and revise for it. But most med schools in most years, people don't fail exams, and they're fine. And very small minority of students fail exam like the second time after the resit to then get kicked out of med school. So kind of it's one of those things that once you get into med school, it's harder to kind of get out of it than not if you want to be there, basically. So I wouldn't worry about it. I think probably like the dropout rate of med school is probably very, very low, and the med schools want to keep you in medicine and to help you become a doctor as much as possible, unless you're literally dangerous, because they're investing so much money in you, especially as the years go by. So like the more you go down the years, the more money they spend on you, the less likely they're going to kick you out, as long as you're doing fine and you're going to be a safe doctor. That's what it's all about. Yes, I'm in my final year, which is year 6 out of 6. So rather than 5th year in a 5-year course, I'm in my 6th year in a 6-year course. Yeah, something like that. Cool. You're very welcome. Only have one interview, so try not to put too much pressure on it. Really enjoyed these sessions and appreciate the hype. Roshan, thanks. Yeah, don't having one interview can be stressful and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, a lot of us have been in that position. I've been in your position, and on the other side, we've done all right. So it is what it is, and there'll be more opportunities either way. Cool. The last question I've got is from Be Medically Medic. So last question before we go. What factors would you need to consider when breaking bad news? Breaking bad news is a very, very tricky type of question. What I'd say is you need to factor what has happened in the scenario so far, what the person in front of you is asking in terms of questions, and then being able to comfort them based on those questions, and basically trying to show empathy and show like a human touch to them, and saying like, hey, like I'm going to try my best to make you feel okay, but making sure you're honest as well when you're delivering the information. A lot of the time, communication skills like this, it's a lot to do with your like body language, your hands, your eyes, like the way you're looking at the person, your tone of voice, even more than sometimes the speech. So yeah, so those are just a few factors for you to consider when breaking bad news. And if you're here next week at 6 p.m. Medically Medic, if you re-ask that question with any other specific question, I'm sure we can go into more depth on it, because right now we're just short for time, and that's all I've got for you guys. So you're very welcome, Grace. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Roshan, for your questions. And again, good luck for Monday. I'm sure you'll smash it. Keep us updated with how it goes. And yeah, another aspiring medic, thank you for your questions, and Harima as well. It's been super lovely. Nice catching up with you guys and having a kind of a little bit of a good debate and a conversation about of a few key topics that we've spoken about today. So that's been brilliant. And hopefully I helped you guys to an extent. And hopefully with Medmentor, you guys can have a look at the stuff on our website, on our social media, that will help you guys if you're looking at things to help you getting into med school, or like a perspective on it. And look at our blog posts, our resources, a few vlogs that we do on the Medmentor Instagram story and page. And I will be back here next week at 6 p.m. Running the weekly live clinic on Medmentor. So do join us for that, and every week from then on in. Brilliant. Thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.